Hey everyone, and welcome to the Sim Soaring Club channel. Today, we're diving into one of the most important aspects of gliding in Microsoft Flight Simulator, the weather. More specifically, we're going to take a closer look at how gliders actually stay in the air, what kinds of lift are modeled in the sim, what limitations you might run into, and how you can overcome them using custom weather presets. Whether you're new to soaring or just looking to get more out of your experience in MSFS, this should help you fly smarter and stay aloft longer. Let's get into it. In the real world, gliders rely on natural sources of rising air, which we call lift. There are a few primary types. The first, and probably the most common, is thermals. These are rising columns of warm air that form when the sun heats up the ground unevenly. As the warm air gathers and becomes lighter than the surrounding cooler air, it begins to rise in bubbles or columns that can carry a glider thousands of feet into the sky. Next up is ridge lift, which occurs when wind encounters a mountain or hillside and is forced upward along the slope. As long as you stay on the windward side where the wind is hitting the terrain, you can ride that upward airflow for long distances, often with surprisingly consistent lift. And finally, we have wave lift and convergence. These are more complex phenomena and can generate incredibly strong lift under the right conditions. Unfortunately, they're not currently modeled in Microsoft Flight Simulator. So for now, when we talk about soaring in the sim, we're mostly dealing with thermals and ridge lift. Now, let's talk about how this all translates into Microsoft Flight Simulator. MSFS does include a basic but usable model for both thermals and ridge lift. Let's start with thermals. In the sim, these come in two forms: ground-based and cloud-based. Ground-based thermals are generated when the sun heats the terrain. The strength of this lift depends on a few key factors like the time of day, the season, and the land class, which refers to the type of surface. Forests, towns, fields, rocks, they all absorb heat differently. Thermals tend to be strongest in the summer, and they usually peak around midday, becoming weaker as the sun drops lower in the sky. The downside is, these thermals are hard to spot and generally not very reliable, especially compared to cloud-based thermals. Now, cloud-based thermals are tied to the presence of cumulus clouds in the sim. If a cloud is tall and dense enough, it can generate a strong updraft beneath or nearby. These are more promising, but as we'll see, there are some limitations here too. Ridge lift in MSFS works in a fairly straightforward way. When wind hits elevated terrain, the sim calculates lift based on wind speed and the angle of the slope. The steeper the terrain and the more directly the wind hits it, the better the lift. In theory, this works well enough, but it's not without issues. And that brings us to the problems with how lift is simulated in MSFS. Let's start with the thermals again. One of the biggest drawbacks with the way ground thermals are modeled is that they don't form clouds. In the real world, as warm air rises, it cools and condenses, eventually forming cumulus clouds. These clouds are essential visual markers that help glider pilots locate lift. But in the sim, this is not the case, and that makes these ground thermals completely invisible and much harder to find. To the sim's credit, it does include cloud-based thermals that are linked to the size and altitude of cumulus clouds. But these only become active when the clouds are particularly tall, dense, and well-developed. And unfortunately, those conditions are rarely present when using live weather. So while the system technically exists, it doesn't often come into play unless you customize the weather yourself. Ridge lift has its own set of limitations. For one, it tends to work far too high above terrain. In the real world, you'd need to hug the ridge closely to stay in lift. But in MSFS, you can often gain altitude even if you're flying tens of thousands of feet above the slope, which isn't realistic at all. Even worse, once you drop below 1,000 feet above ground level, the sim starts to cut the lift strength significantly. That's a problem, because that's exactly where ridge lift should be strongest, right next to the terrain. This is where the Soaring Weather presets come in. These are custom weather presets designed specifically for gliding, and you can download them for free. Installing them is simple. Just drag and drop them into your weather presets folder, and you're good to go. These presets address a lot of the issues we've covered so far. They include cloud layers that are tall enough to produce realistic thermals, giving you visual indicators for where lift might be found. They also improve ridge lift by adding stronger wind layers close to the terrain and gradually reducing that strength as you move higher. This creates more realistic behavior where lift is concentrated near the slope and tapers off the further you get from it. It's a bit of a trade-off, but the end result is a flight experience that feels much closer to real-world soaring. What's great is that these presets give you full control over the conditions. There are 122 different configurations to choose from, offering a range of wind directions, wind speeds, and cloud cover types. This means you can tailor the weather to suit the kind of task you're flying, whether it's a flatland cross-country or a high-speed ridge run through the mountains. So now the big question, how do you actually find lift in the sim? Well, it all starts with picking the right preset. If you're aiming for thermals, go with something that includes scattered or partly cloudy skies, and set the time to midday for best conditions. If you're planning a ridge flight, choose a wind direction that aligns with the terrain you'll be flying in. Cloud thermals are usually strongest on the windward side of cumulus clouds. Since the thermals drift with the wind, the lower you are, the more offset they'll be from the center of the cloud. Try approaching from upwind and feel out where the lift begins. Ridge lift, on the other hand, is found on the windward face of the terrain. Stay clear of the backside, or lee side. There's often sink or turbulence there that can catch you out. The steeper the ridge and the more perpendicular the wind hits it, the better the lift. And remember, stay close. The higher you get above the slope, the weaker the lift becomes. Your ideal soaring scenario? A sun-heated rocky slope, topped with a well-formed cumulus cloud, and a steady wind hitting it head-on. That's where you'll find the strongest and most reliable lift in MSFS. To get the most out of the Soaring Weather presets, a few key tips can make all the difference. For thermal flying, set the season to summer and the time to around noon. This gives you the strongest thermal activity. Always pick a preset with a wind direction that suits your flight plan, especially if you're relying on ridge lift. When hunting for thermals, aim for the windward side of cumulus clouds, not directly underneath, as that's where lift is usually strongest. In the mountains, stay close to the terrain to find the strongest lift. When gliding from one cloud to the next, follow sun-heated terrain like rocks, cities, or dry fields, and avoid large forests and bodies of water to minimize sink. One final tip. Set the turbulence level in your assistance settings to low to avoid overly aggressive turbulence that doesn't reflect real soaring conditions. I hope this breakdown has helped you understand how the weather system in Microsoft Flight Simulator works and how to make it work for you when soaring. With the right presets and a little planning, you can enjoy much more realistic, immersive, and rewarding flights. If you've got questions or want to share your experience, feel free to leave a comment below. And if you found this helpful, leave a like and consider subscribing for more gliding content. Thanks for watching, and see you up there.